Hey, welcome back to Resilience Builds, where we show you how to maintain and modify your vehicle through how-tos and car reviews. Today, we're looking at how to do an oil change on this 2003 Toyota 4Runner. So first thing we need to do is to assemble all the parts and tools we're going to need in order to get the job done. So obviously we're going to need oil if we're going to do an oil change. And in the case of this 2UZ V8 in the 4Runner, we're going to need 6.5 quarts. Shop towels are helpful for cleaning up oily messes and for later checking the engine's oil dipstick. Brake parts cleaner is going to be essential for cleaning off surfaces in and around the engine when doing an oil change. Next, we're going to need our oil filter as well as our oil drain plug rubber gasket. You're going to need a 12 or 13 millimeter socket in order to get off the front skid plate so that we can get to the oil filter, as well as we're going to need a 14 millimeter socket in order to take off the oil drain plug so that we can drain the oil. A ratchet with a 6-inch extension is also going to be helpful so we can get all the bolts off quickly, and remember an oil catch can of some sort so that we can catch all that old oil. First thing you're going to want to do is get the car safely jacked up. You can do this using jack stands, put it on a lift. In my case, I like using these Rhino ramps and then just setting my e-brake. As you can see, I'm slowly taking off the front skid plate, just going one by one on each of those 13 millimeter bolts. You still have OEM hardware. That's an M8 by 1.25 pitch by 1 inch bolt with a 12 millimeter hex head. Now, as I'm taking off the skid plate, you're going to see that there's two prongs holding it in place. You're just going to dip it down and out. And remember to keep those 4 bolts with the skid plate for reinstall later. And next up, we got the oil filter removal. So I got my oil catch can or bin. I just have that oil under the oil filter, and I'm just catching the oil that comes dripping out of there. It's going to be about half a quart. And from this view, you can actually see where the oil filter is and why the skid plate was blocking it just under the anti-roll bar there. Now, once you have the oil filter off, you're going to want to take out the new oil filter and then dab some new oil around the rubber O-ring that you'll see on the bottom face of the filter. Now, carefully line it up with the threads on the oil filter housing and then tighten it to hand tight, which for me is right before I would have to strain my wrist and arm in order to further tighten the oil filter. And what you're seeing me do here is just clean up residual oil with some brake parts cleaner and some shop towels. So with the oil catcher now under the access panel under the engine, we can now begin to loosen the drain plug and begin to drain the oil out of our engine. Something that will quicken the engine oil draining is if we take off the engine oil cap on the top of the engine. One helpful technique is to loosen the oil drain plug to 1 or 2 threads and then quickly pull it away so that you don't get your hands dirty, as well as fill up old oil in old bins that you may have saved up from previous oil changes. Something to help quicken the oil change process is while the oil is draining is just to clean up your area as well as to clean up the oil drain plug and prepare it with the new rubber gasket, which will also put a thin layer of new oil on. One technique you can use if you don't have a torque wrench is to install the oil drain plug hand tight and then using your socket and ratchet, turn it 90 degrees, and that will tend to lead to the bolt being nice and snug without cross-threading into the oil pan. Next, we're going to fill the engine with the correct amount of engine oil. In this case, it takes 6.5 quarts in order to completely fill the 2UZ V8 found in this 4Runner. Toyota recommends that you use a 5W30 weight engine oil with these 2UZ motors. I like to use a 5W40 just because mine has over 230,000 miles on it. You can find all this information and more in your owner's manual. Remember to also verify the oil's level in the sump by checking the oil engine dipstick. Remember to clean up any engine oil spills and to recycle any used engine oil at your local auto parts dealer. Last thing to do is to now reinstall your front skid plate. First thing to do is to relocate those 4 13mm bolts, then line up the front prongs and then slowly lift up the back. I then like to use my hands to first install the bolts if I can, and then in a 4-star pattern, reinstall the 4 bolts and then torque them down. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you found this information valuable, remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And as always, have an awesome day.